Hi guys, let's go watching. Just before that, subscribe and enjoy yourself.
A young girl is having lunch at a table. It can be seen that she comes from an aristocratic and wealthy family, which is evident from the presence of a fork and knife. She is also a very pretty blue-eyed blonde with an excited look. The protagonist is not alone at the table. There are two young boys present, and the head of the family, the father, is sitting at the head of the table. He is the Pope, as indicated by his huge cross around his neck. Everything in the room is done to taste. There is a red tablecloth on the table, and patterns adorn the walls. The father, with his head held high and a proud look on his face, tells everyone at the table that he has finally found a good groom for his daughter. My daughter's eyes were almost filled with tears of surprise and excitement for the future. But at the same time, a girlish joy can be seen on her face. One of Angier de Borgia's sons jumps off the table and starts screaming. His fists are clenched in anger. He does not care that not even 3 months have passed since the dissolution of his previous marriage. Pope Borgia himself tries to look calm and reassure his son Angevin. First of all, he advises him to think about the feelings of the protagonist Rudbeckia, his sister. Without eating a bite, the father continues the discussion. He is alarmed by his brother's love and care for his sister, which he had never noticed on his part before. Pope Borgia goes on to emphasize that military operations are underway on their territory and that they need Britain's help to fight back. He asks his youngest son, Angier, if he is ready to fight himself. Angie responds by breaking down again and shouting. The guy waves his hands emotionally. He assures us that the enemies can be defeated without any problems and without outside help by their knights in the south. Pope Borgia is thinking. He is upset by his son's words and sits with his head down. The last thing he wanted was conflict in his home right now, so he asks Angie to calm down and not argue with him. Flying in the clouds, Rudbeckia continues to smile and ignore the argument between her father and brother. She only cares about her fiancé, so despite the tense situation, she continues to ask who he is. The father smiles at his daughter. She is his favorite comfort. With a joyful look, he tells her that he is the Knight Britannicus whom everyone loves so much. He assures Rudbeckia that she will love him too. He goes on to tell us more about it. Everyone finds out that he is the king's nephew and the best knight in the north. Angan seems to be onto something. He tells me that he knows about his bad deeds. Then the main character, the blue-eyed blonde Rudbeckia, warns that this knight, whom everyone loved and respected so much, and whom her father wanted to have in his house, is really not that good. It becomes known that a famous knight from the north will do something terrible, namely, kill many people in the house of his future father-in-law. The second brother, Cheshire, with dark hair, hugged his sister and whispered something in her ear. Cheshire is the first son of the Borgias. He affectionately shortens Rudbeckia's name when addressing her. Rudbeckia notices that she has some strange feelings while doing this. Angier becomes gloomy again, and his eyes show that he does not fully understand what is happening. He sits with his hand on his head and thinks. Pope Borgia and an exquisite lady in a red dress and pomegranate balls, his wife, continue to sit at the table and look happy. What they wanted happened. Then a smile shines on Rudbeckia's face. She feels grateful to her father and is happy that by marrying a knight from the north, she will be able to help her family and people. Mr. Borgia notices his daughter's good mood and supports her. He says encouraging words to her and thanks her for her understanding. Both are very happy at this moment. Cheshire continues to look at Rudbeckia. He admires her, especially when she smiles so sincerely and shines with happiness. He likes her appearance. Looking ahead again, the main character reminds us of the terrible events in the house ahead, and she would be one of the victims of her famous fiancé on that bloody night. But it turns out that Rudbeckia had a past life. She was in a plane crash and did not survive. After that, she hoped that everyone would finally leave her alone, because her miserable life was over. She recalls all this now when she's vomiting in the bathroom. But she dreamed of being a beautiful lady with a dramatic fate. This is the story she read in her past life before the event that took her life. Rudbeckia's life was very difficult until her death. The environment and the people around me were extremely unkind. She thought that her heroine could have the same drama in her life if she had mysterious people around her from whom she could expect anything. She was scared just thinking about it. Once again, Rudbeckia is doing her usual thing in the bathroom over the toilet, and it is at this time that she is haunted by a stream of thoughts about her past and present life. The bathroom looks very nice, as does everything in the castle. After finishing her dirty work, Ruby cries and wonders why things are not different in her new life. Why is her life so unhappy again? She concludes that it's all about her strange family members. There are always a lot of maids walking around the castle, and it's hard for Rudbeckia to hide the fact that she often vomits over the toilet. On top of that, she had a terrible disease. She had anorexia from her past life. The protagonist recalls her family from her past life. She is originally from Korea. Later, she was adopted by a wealthy family from Spain, where she had 3 other children, 1 sister, and 2 older brothers. The wealth of the new Spanish family allowed the Korean girl to attend a private school and have some status in society. In her spare time, she was engaged in ballet, tennis, and horseback riding. All the things that a child from a wealthy family should do, where parents develop and invest in their children in every possible way. But somehow everything changed, and a girl from a prestigious school began to notice some strange mockery of herself. They were unreasonable, but very offensive. The heroine had no choice but to laugh with everyone else for company, because she could not understand that they were laughing at her. On top of that, they started copying it. She continued to attend a private school because she had no other choice. Her environment was unchanged and still evil. Time went on, she grew up, changed her hairstyle and appearance, listened to insults, and stopped reacting to them. The family that adopted her also began to change for the worse over time. She will be among them like a white crow. And she often listened to every family member laugh at her. Soon the girl notices changes in the relationship between her foster parents. The thing is that each of them had a love affair on the side. At the same time, one of their sons, the younger of the girl's brothers, also went down a bad path. He was often caught by the police in bad company with drugs. Soon, the family was in for a big loss. Her older sister died at the age of 21. Because of her bad life and family problems, she decided to take her own life. She was the only one who supported the main character at least sometimes. That's why Ruby in her past life is left all alone during this period. At first, the young girl had a good relationship with her older brother, but they also began to deteriorate over time. He became more and more unfriendly and glared at her. He dominated her, and she was very afraid of him. The brother began to develop all the behaviors of a terrible person, just like their father. The main character had no choice but to show everyone that everything was fine in their family, and that she was a happy, cheerful person. Although she was often sad because she was lonely, she always had horror and fear in her eyes. Every mistake could have cost her life, and these were her closest people. The only consolation for the girl was reading. She was fond of novels, and at the age of 16, one such novel, Sodom and the Grail, became a real discovery for her. She identified herself with the main character. The events described in the novel took place many years ago. There she was a young blonde, Lady Rudbeckia de Borgia. A white sheet with flowers symbolizes purity and kindness. Similarly, in a novel, good must overcome darkness. If we talk about the time when the main events in the book took place, it was a century when the church occupied the main positions, and the clergy crossed all kinds of lines, taking advantage of their position. The Pope was in charge, and everyone obediently followed him. Not everyone liked it, and so the next events will inevitably happen. His entourage, who were close to the Pope, set him up by enlisting the support of people from the north. These people killed the Pope, sparing his family as well. The main character is then transported back to the events that preceded that bloody night. It should be recalled here that her name was Rudbeckia, and she was the daughter of Pope Borgia. And no matter how hard she tried to hide, the horror of human records was on her heels and did not spare even such a pretty girl. The young man's face is covered in blood, for he is the cold-blooded murderer of Rudbeckia and her family. And most importantly, this man was her beloved husband. Rudbeckia's life was ambiguous. The family needed her for their own purposes. She was now remarried. Before that, she had been married 4 times, but it all ended. The girl's new chosen one was an honorary knight from the Kingdom of Britain at the age of 15. The young man's name was Iski van Omerta. He was famous for his military career and fearlessness. Rumor has it that at the age of 17, he deservedly received the title of the youngest victorious knight. His country was attacked by monsters, and he bravely fought them alone and won. Along with being a knight of the upper class, Iski had a complex character. Pride and arrogance were his main character traits. The brightest girls of the whole north were embarrassed before him and wanted his attention. The ladies looked at him fascinated and lined up in a line. Iski himself did not like any talk of marriage, and was angry when his father wanted to find him a bride as soon as possible. For my father, this was the most important goal. Iski's only close female relatives were his younger sister and childhood friend Freya. They spent a lot of time together, while the other girls envied them and kept their eyes on them. Isk Omert's mother died, which caused him great trauma and made him a closed-minded young man. Omerta lived a love drama in her life. She was madly in love with the young duke. Unable to survive unrequited love, she committed suicide. Iski's children and sister took the death of their mother very hard, but it really united them with each other. Since Omerta was a princess, the topic of her suicide was never discussed anywhere and was generally kept secret as a sinful act. But despite Iski's closeness and callousness, he did marry the beautiful Rudbeckia. Circumstances demanded that the families of the North and the South unite, and in order to prevent his favorite younger sister from getting engaged to Anjan, he had to become Rudbeckia's husband himself. Over time, Rudbeckia began to realize that their marriage was not based on Iski's true feelings for her, and this upset her. She often sat alone and thought. The Vatican, where she lived with her family, was attacked by enemies, and their people could not protect the country on their own, so they needed outside help. Her marriage meant that the Kingdom of Britain would now send its bravest knights to help the Vatican, because now the families are united. Rudbeckia also had a plan, which she successfully implemented. Soon after, she and her entire family were brutally and bloody murdered by Iski. The plan was that she treated her husband's younger sister, Isk, to a flavored tea that was poisoned. Rudbeckia understood what consequences awaited her after such an act, and that Iske will not let this go unpunished. But it was her brother Cheshire who persuaded her to do all this. The people around her were distrustful of Rudbeckia and considered her a Cossack exiled to the court. In addition, she misbehaved with the maids and always shouted at them to tell them what she wanted. The maids were afraid of her and bowed their heads to their mistress. Ruby put her sister Usk on the same level as the maids who always carried the hem of her dress like a great queen. Here, the author returns to the memories of a girl who was in a plane crash and has been living a life where she is the daughter of the Pope for 3 years. The Spanish girl seems to be looking at herself from the outside and analyzing why she, Rudbeckia, began to live such a wrong life and was so unkind. Ruby seems to be living a happy life, smiling a lot, and always surrounded by her 2 brothers who treat her well and love her. In the end, the girl from Spain from her past life realizes that she is a doll in someone else's hands, namely in the hands of her seemingly perfect family. The girl's thoughts lead her to realize that both in her past life and in the present, she is like a bird in a golden cage, and there is only darkness around. She was just thinking that life was a little better for the current Rudbeckia when someone came into the room and interrupted her thoughts by calling out to her. Her older brother was standing on the doorstep, and the girl addressed him gently, as if to show how happy she was to see him. Cheshire expressed his excitement in his gaze at his sister. He was the first to start the dialogue. The brother and sister stood opposite each other. Cheshire said he didn't like his sister's mood, and it worried him. Rudbeckia laughed in response and confirmed that her brother is attentive and never makes mistakes. But Rudbeckia's inner voice warned her that it was all a game played by her older brother, and she shouldn't believe it. Then Cheshire, stroking the golden turtle on the table, began to ask his sister what she thought about her upcoming marriage, whether she was upset about it. The statue turtle's eyes seemed to Ruby as cunning as her brother's at that moment. He asked her to be honest with him, but Rudbeckia sat at the table and realized that her honesty could cost her dearly. She was annoyed by her brother and the damned turtle. She quickly realized everything and pulled herself together. With a friendly look, she explained that she was just worried that the North was far away from her home and family, and she will not see her brother much. Cheshire hurried to reassure her and said that her husband would be by her side now, and she has no reason to worry about being alone. Rudbeckia tilted her head down and objected to Cheshire. None of this mattered to her. She said that she would always want to be with him. The young man put his hand on Ruby's head and was pleased with her recognition that he was the most important thing to her. It gave him great pleasure. After all, the most beautiful girl, Romana, is at his feet, but the touch of a seemingly loving hand can become deadly in an instant. Rudbeckia understood and predicted this. Rudbeckia was concerned about her brother's attitude toward her, and she had a lot of questions. The main question was why Cheshire, who seemed to love her so much, could be so cruel and self-serving to her. He caused her pain, both physical and moral. Cheshire looked at Ruby with his blue angelic eyes, which held no answer for the girl. He was unwavering and remained mysterious. The protagonist continues her story and recalls that she began to get used to her new life only at the age of 15. It was at that moment that people began to rumor that the young beauty was supposedly marrying the Duke of Rembrandt's kingdom. These were the characters in the novel that the Spanish girl was reading before the plane crash. In the book, The marriage was dissolved because of the groom's physical characteristics. The heroine of the novel did not want to put up with his male shortcomings, and it was he who made it so that the young lady's family would suffer a disaster in the future. Rudbeckia knew the plot of the book well, so she wanted to do things differently in real life and prevent the tragedy. After all, she felt sorry for her loving family. She had no choice but to refuse to marry the Duke of Rembrandt. This decision was difficult for her. Soon, she began to notice how her father, the Pope, was changing. Her angry look made her feel cold inside. She remembered that she had already experienced similar feelings in her past life. Rudbeckia realized that she was living the same life, in which she was alone and had to expect danger from the people closest to her. One night, she was in hell. She was beaten severely by her brother Cheshire, and even her screams and requests to leave her did not stop his atrocities. This continued several times, and the girl realized that she was trapped in what awaited her. It should be noted that Rudbeckia was not a sibling to her brothers. This fact further untied Cheshire's hands and gave him a reason to do terrible things to the young lady. Rudbeckia's own mother's name was Carmen, and she died immediately after giving birth. Carmen was already pregnant when she began communicating with Pope Borgia. Rudbeckia, having had a negative experience in her past life, developed a new strategy for dealing with her tyrant relatives. By pretending to be a submissive girl, she thought it would save her life. The main character became a dramatic actress in her family's theater. She pretended to be a saintly and naive girl. Her tears looked so sincere, but inside the girl, a storm of negative emotions raged in relation to her good brother. She mentally called him a psycho and quietly hated him. Cheshire, with an unwavering face and angelic eyes, pitied his sister and said he was sorry to send her away from home so far. Rudbeckia interrogated her brother during the tea party. She said she was afraid because there were many terrible people and robbers in the north. Cheshire responded by hugging her and assuring her that the most powerful knights of the north would stand up for her and not let her be offended. He also promised to visit her new home often. He skillfully clouded her brain with stories about the beautiful cities of the north and that she should definitely travel there. According to him, their separation will last only 6 months. At the same time, he stroked her and her long golden hair affectionately. Hope appeared in Rudbeckia's eyes, and she asked happily that it was only for 6 months, and then she could return. The brother continued to persuade Ruby in a nice and convincing way. He said that she just needed to be patient, and that during this time her husband would not touch her. Ruby was unwavering in her opinions about Cheshire. She wanted him to go on the mission instead of her. Rudbeckia held her brother's hand and played the role of a submissive sister. She wondered if he would wait for her for that long. Cheshire assured her that he would certainly be waiting. Ruby's tears came to her eyes at his words, but she wanted to never see him again, and she wanted him to stop coming to her. All her free time, the young girl was working on a plan to survive. Therefore, Cheshire's visit to her in the north was completely inappropriate. At this point, the protagonist thinks that perhaps she shouldn't kill Freya, her husband's sister, which was bound to happen in the future. But she realizes that if she had left them alive, sooner or later this would have happened. The killer would certainly be her older brother Cheshire. Ruby also analyzes that in such a scenario, she would have been labeled a murderer anyway, and the whole society would have thought so. So she comes up with a new plan to save her husband's beloved sister Freya, and she has only 6 months to do so. After that, the people of the north will begin to trust her. Rudbeckia's life was absolutely similar to the one she had before she died. She understood this well. Let's return to the festive image of the main character. She is timidly stepping into a new life. Rudbeckia is a beautiful bride in a beautiful dress and with a beautiful hairstyle, but her eyes are sad and her head is down, as if she is ashamed of something. She looks at her father with a curious look, who is coming toward her and who is going to use her in his political and military games. Pope Borgia is also dressed for the occasion. He expresses his admiration for his daughter and says that she is the most beautiful bride of all. At the same time, he mentions God. Like a loving father, he embraces Rudbeckia and says that all the knights of the north will be at her feet and will fight for her heart because she is so beautiful. In response, Rudbeckia could not hold back her tears. She was touched by her father's words, and she just says his name, unable to say anything else. But her thoughts were completely different. The Pope reassures his daughter and promises that this time will pass quickly and they will see each other soon. Rudbeckia dreams of never seeing him and her family again. At the same time, he also sheds a fake tear and says that he will miss his daughter very much. He expresses his sadness that his older brother Cheshire should have been the one to see her off, but the situation is not quite right now. Rudbeckia is mentally very happy about this, that she will no longer see that monster Cheshire, and that he will not accompany her. She justifies her thoughts by saying that people are saying a lot of bad things about her relationship with Cheshire. And once again, there is no need to give reasons. The father remains calm and happy. And Rudbeckia doesn't understand why he doesn't care that people from the north are gossiping about him in Cheshire. She wonders if her father is pretending to be a fool. Everyone was in a festive and good mood. Ruby's younger brother, Engen, was very angry and did not hide his emotions. His displeased face shows that he does not like the fact that Rudbeckia is marrying a knight of the north and that no one listened to him when he tried to refuse. Engen has no choice but to support and hug his sister Rudbeckia on her wedding day. But he can't smile at this, even through force. Rudbeckia takes refuge in her younger brother and thinks that he is the only one who has never hurt her, despite the fact that he was actually a very emotional and characteristic young man. Putting her head on the shoulder of her so-called family member, Ruby promises him that she will miss him. He is the only one she considers normal out of all the family members. Angie squeezes Rudbeckia so hard that Cheshire, who was standing next to her, becomes very nervous and asks her not to strangle her sister like that. Then it was time to greet and say goodbye to his older brother Cheshire. He looked at his beautiful sister and realized how skillfully they all used her. He was wiping Rudbeckia's tears, and she was addressing him tenderly. She asked him to promise that he would definitely come to visit her in the near future. Looking her in the eye with his blue eyes, Cheshire assured her not to worry, because they would see each other soon. He said he would come soon. Rudbeckia was so eager to escape and survive that she played the role perfectly with her family. She showed love and trust for Cheshire, and she did it easily. During her wedding, the protagonist thinks that in her past life, because of her unbearable existence, she dreamed of death, and after a while she ended up in a plane crash. Sometimes she thinks that this present life is no different from the past life she lived in Spain, and now she is again a hostage of her family. But now Rudbeckia has a great lust for life and is doing everything she can to escape and survive. She feels funny at such thoughts. A blond young man stood with his brothers and emotionally proved something to them. He begged Isk to talk about an important topic. Iska, who was sitting under a tree, took his knight's helmet off his head and looked tired and upset. He turned away from the interlocutor and said that he was not eager to talk. In this way, he showed indifference. The blond young man was confused and did not expect such a reaction and refusal from Iski. He didn't know how to get him to talk. Then he started mocking and asking Iski what had happened to him and why he refused to talk about it. Iski told him that it was Ellen's request. Hearing this, the blond young man starts shouting. He blames Iski for always helping him and getting him out of any unclear situations. He clearly doesn't like it. Iski sits still again and tells his friend, in a completely indifferent tone, that he is doing all this for Iski's sister, for whom he has feelings. He emphasizes that it is not his fault, and he is not asking for help. The blond young man cringes inside at Isk's words and boils with anger. He wants to put the knight in his place, but he restrains himself. Instead, he tells the upset Iska that his wife has arrived and has been here for quite some time. He reproaches Iska for not wanting to see her and begins to persuade him. A friend tries to persuade his friend to at least have lunch with his newly arrived wife. But before he can finish his sentence, Iska throws his iron helmet at him. With a completely indifferent look on her face, Iska thinks that she won't be lonely, because everyone talks about her so much and dreams of meeting her. Iski's interlocutor is getting emotional again. He doesn't understand how such a famous knight of the north can be so stupid. But watching Iski clench his fists in anger, he does not find the words to say that he went to that place only out of curiosity about the young lady's face. He explains that he was eager to see what the Pope's daughter really looked like, and then he shouts at Iska that in that case he should have gone to meet her himself. The fight between the knights continues. Iski shouts at his blonde friend that he has a very shitty temper, which always gets him into trouble. Their comrades were already tired of listening to the quarrels between the two knights. They are sitting under a tree and realize that a new conflict is starting. The blond young man loses his temper, waving his arms and calling Isa bad names. The latter stood there and remained silent, unable to find the right words. Or he simply did not consider it necessary to answer. When the emotions subside and the guys calm down a bit, the friend apologizes to Isk and admits that he went a little overboard. Iski stands motionless. Then they continue a normal, calm dialogue. The second knight asks the groom if there is anything else he wants to know from him. Iska doesn't understand what it is. The friend replies that he means the question about his new bride. What she looks like in person, whether she is as beautiful as in her portrait, whether she has a good personality. He reproaches himself for being so indifferent. Iski replies with a dull look that he has no desire, let alone much interest, to learn anything about the young lady. The other knight continues to tease him and says that he'd better see her in real life soon, and that soon he would have to meet her and fulfill his manly duties. He adds that he is worried about his friend Isk and doesn't want him to be ashamed of his intimate details, and even more so, to be mocked. After all, the young lady's ex-husband had big male problems. Iski asks his friend if he believes in all this theater about their union with the Pope's daughter and how long he thinks it can last. He feels that no one believes in their supposed love. The blond young man wanted to hint to him about his relationship with Freya, but he thought that he would not understand it, because in his opinion, he was a big dummy in reality. Then he begins to reveal the cards about his fiancée. He says that he overheard something interesting when he went to meet a young lady who had arrived at the ship. According to him, a certain Sir Evanston reported that the young woman was not feeling well on the ship on the way to the north. She was very sick and even vomited. It seems that it was seasickness that manifested itself in her. However, he also added that Rudbeckia's face was very sweet and beautiful, and her smile was so wide and snow-white. Everything is as they said it would be. And yet Sir Evanston noticed that she was very disturbed by something. This was seen by all those present, who followed her with their eyes as she left the ship with an escort. Iski's friend also characterizes his wife as a very small girl. Isk is surprised at this and asks why. The blonde knight explains that she is quite short and shows her approximately what she looks like. Iski doesn't like this, and he calls her insulting names. Rudbeckia's fiancé is frightened and upset by this fact, and the other knight tries to calm him down and asks him to be more attentive to her and take her place in this situation. He also adds that she must be very scared and doesn't know what lies ahead. After all, this marriage is so spontaneous and unpredictable for both of them. According to Comrade Iski, Rudbeckia might be lonely here and look like a hostage, even though she is in such a beautiful place. Iski doesn't recognize his friend and wonders why he would be so merciful and care so much about everyone. He asks him about it. The blond young man smiles and says that this is not surprising. After all, his best friend's fiancée is the daughter of the Pope himself, and he should treat her like an angel. Iski replies that he remembers him always saying that he wanted to kill the Pope at any opportunity, and asks why he was so kind to his daughter. He looks at his friend suspiciously while he justifies himself and explains the true meaning of his words. The other knights hear their conversation. While the friends continue to debate, the third knight begins to reproach them for selling their country for the beauty of some Borgia lady from another area. The blond young man turns around and sees who dared to eavesdrop on their conversation and brazenly intervene in their argument. Isk is also surprised. Within a minute, a sword was held to Iski's friend's throat, and the danger came from a place where it was not expected. The attacker turned out to be a young man named Lorenzo, who seemed very young. But with his whole look, he showed that he was brave and right. Then, a real scuffle broke out between the boys. Iski's best friend threatened the young attacker that he would pay for daring to raise his hand to the older man. He was embarrassed in response and almost started apologizing and making excuses. Iski tried to calm the boys down and asked Lorenzo what he was getting out of it and why he was interfering in their affairs. Lorenzo grabbed his head, which probably hurt after the battle with the older knight, and addressed Isk respectfully with a wish and a request. He said that he would be extremely happy if Iski married his older sister, but he noted that this should only happen after his divorce from the Pope's daughter. He also emphasized that without it, Iski should not even approach his sister. The protagonist stood there with an imperturbable look and remained silent, while his best friend had only questions in his head. Not understanding anything, he began to throw poor Lorenzo around and demanded explanations. He was so surprised and frightened that he was shaking. After being hit on the head again, Lorenzo apologized and managed to explain the essence of his previous request. He meant that Sir Isk needed to disappear from his sister's life for a while. He believed that Rudbeckia Borgia was a witch and that she could poison his sister out of jealousy or for any reason. That's why he was experiencing it. This infuriated Iski's best friend, and he blamed Lorenzo for his unfounded conclusions about the situation. He emphasized that, due to his young age, he had no right to get involved in such things. In response, Lorenzo tried to prove his words by saying that he saw his sister lock herself in her room and cry. This happened right after she allegedly visited Omerta Castle. The second knight was very surprised that Lady Freya had gone to Omerta Castle by herself and asked several times if he had heard something. Lorenzo clarified that when Rudbeckia Borgia arrived at her future castle, she saw his sister Freya having tea with Princess Alina. The blonde young man was shocked by Lorenzo's statements and mentally called him a fool because he did not understand why Freya was really crying, because she had seen the bride of Iska. He also considered Iski to be unreasonable on this issue. Suddenly, the knights notice that Iski has changed in face and is up to something. Lorenzo turns to him to ask what happened while the other knight is still holding him back. The main character is heading somewhere without answering questions. Then his friend asks him again where he is going. Lorenzo tries to shout at Isk's back that he hasn't finished talking to him yet, but he gets slapped in the face by the blonde young man. Iski says he needs to rest, so he leaves them. His best friend didn't like it and thought that Iski had treated his friends badly, that he had left them at the very moment he needed them. The other knights, witnesses to the events, continue to lie casually under the tree. They pretend they didn't hear or see anything. One even pretends to be asleep. The blonde young man looks after Isk and realizes that he is too stubborn and has his own plans, which he does not intend to let anyone in on. In a huge castle, a dialogue takes place in which Rudbeckia is asked why she became very sick on the ship and whether she feels well now. Rudbeckia smilingly tells the young princess, with whom she is sitting at the set table, that it's nothing. It's just her first time on such a long journey. Ruby then looks down and admits that she has never left her native south in her life. She blushes at this admission. Her interlocutor, with a cup of tea in her hand, calms the protagonist down and admits that she has never traveled further than Arundel, and there is nothing to be ashamed of. Rudbeckia listens attentively to the young lady and does not take her eyes off her. She finds it too beautiful, and it even annoys her a little. The young lady's name is Alina van Omerta, and she is the younger sister of her new husband, Iski. The Pope's daughter considers the princess's beauty even sinful. Alina notices that the plates remain full and asks Rudbeckia why she hasn't eaten anything. She worries that she might not have liked the food and explains that they deliberately prepared light meals for the guest after the trip. Rudbeckia looks at how appetizing the salad and fragrant croissants look. She hastens to reassure me that she likes everything. The reason is that she was tired and a little nervous. But in reality, she realizes that no matter what kind of food she eats, she will vomit it up anyway. Nothing will stay inside. Alina tells us that every summer they experience an invasion of spider-like monsters called arachnes. She complains that they are brutally terrorizing their lands. This is how she explains her brother's absence. Alina adds that Isk asked her to understand this and enter their position. The young princess also apologizes for the absence of their father, who was also not present when the guests met. She says that her father had to go away on estate business and will return only at the end of the month. Rudbeckia shows herself to be a well-mannered girl. She bows and tells the young mistress of the castle not to worry and assures her that everything is fine. Alina considers it necessary to tell Rudbeckia that after their mother's death, she is the only one who will be dealing with all the issues related to the estate and the household. With a sad and seemingly doomed look, she adds that she wouldn't mind if Isk's new wife changed everything to her liking. Alina instructs the guest that she can express all her wishes to change something in the estate or add to the headmaid. Rudbeckia notes that Alina addresses her respectfully as a lady. It amuses her, but it also makes her feel quite uncomfortable. The guest politely refuses to play the role of hostess in the new castle. She explains this by saying that she hasn't yet had the proper experience of living in the north and is afraid to spoil everything. Alina was embarrassed by her new relative's response and did not know what to say. She looked at it cautiously and studied it. Then she was able to find the right words and, with the calm look of a castle mistress, assured Rudbeckia that she had nothing to worry about. No one dares to think bad things about her. The little girl inside Rudbeckia protests and is embarrassed to be addressed as a real lady. It makes her feel uncomfortable. The protagonist puts her hands on her knees like a true lady and says in a shy voice that she still has one request. Alina immediately responds to these words. Rudbeckia asks that for the first time in her new place, she should be addressed simply as Ruby. At these words, her cheeks turn red and give away her condition. Alina remains silent, but her haughty look said it all. The maid who was present was embarrassed, because she was not used to such a simple way of addressing the masters. The other maids and the estate manager stood downstairs and listened to Rudbeckia's frank confessions that she knew no one here and was having a hard time adapting to her new surroundings. This, in her opinion, may seem a bit strange. She added that she thinks that if she is approached in a simpler way, it will give her more courage and opportunities to get to know new places and people. Elena, continuing to drink her tea, which had apparently become cold long ago, agreed to the guest's request. Ruby feels like a student on an exam. She was very nervous when she voiced her strange request and waited for a response from the young princess. The little girl inside Rudbeckia is healing from being met. Feeling unsure, she asks the owner of the estate again and gets her consent. At this point, Ruby reaches for Elena's hands and tries to kiss them as a sign of respect and gratitude. But future ladies should not behave like that. At the same moment, she thanks Elena and smiles sincerely. She's very happy about such a seemingly trivial thing. Elena delicately takes her hands away from her, and Rudbeckia burns with shame. She apologizes to the lady for her gestures. She replied that it was nothing to worry about, and that she had nothing to worry about. Feeling that the situation is getting smoother, the protagonist decides to ask the other person if she allows him to call her by her first name. Without looking up from her tea, and without looking at Ruby, Elena assures her that of course they can address each other simply, just by name. In her opinion, this would be a manifestation of freedom. The girls continue to sit at the table, and Elena says that she is even annoyed by the excessive modesty and sometimes causes misunderstandings. She does not see anything good or useful in this. Rudbeckia becomes nervous at her words. She thinks she might have looked strange, and Elena now aims to find out who she is and what she really is. The main character rejects panic and reminds herself of what she really wants. She doesn't want everyone to like her in these parts. Her goal in being here is for everyone to think of her as a naive, kind girl. She decides that she needs to pull herself together and not lose her temper. Otherwise, everything could go wrong. Playing innocent, Rudbeckia confesses to Elena that she is used to having misunderstandings in her life. Ruby's inner voice in her head adds that she must now do whatever it takes to prevent this from happening again. She clenches her fists in anger at herself for a possible mistake. Elena behaves rather silently and does not show unnecessary emotions in front of the guest, as if she is studying her. She only offers to show her around and show her the rooms where she will now live. But that's only if Ruby has already finished eating. In one of the rooms, we hear exclamations of delight at the luxury and gloss they see. After all, everything around shines like gold. Rudbeckia, Elena, and a maid entered the room. Ruby, unable to contain her emotions, looks around the room with wide eyes. She says that she does not believe that it will all belong to her. Everyone present went out to the balcony, and Elena clarifies that they all tried to make the room as beautiful and comfortable as possible for the guest's arrival. They were worried whether the young lady would like it. Rudbeckia enthusiastically says that she has always dreamed of a room with windows facing the sea. She notes that she likes everything very much. Elena suggests that Ruby rest after the long journey and assures her that if her brother returns early, he will. But Ruby interrupts her and asks her not to worry about it. The protagonist reminds herself that her goal is not to get love from her new husband. She only wants sympathy from him. Elena and the older maid hurry to leave the girl in her room, but the maid suspects something. You can read it in her eyes and distrustful look, even through her glasses. In the middle of the night, Rudbeckia woke up sneezing heavily. She had time to freeze. She notices that the room has become very cool and she is shaking. She doesn't understand what could have happened. Rudbeckia noticed that the room was also quite dark, with all the candles and even the fireplace out. She can't get warm. She knows that there is an invasion of monsters in the north. Therefore, sacred fires are lit in every home to scare them away. Ruby realizes that they could not have gone out on their own. Shivering from the cold, Rudbeckia tries to light at least one fire, but cannot find anything burning in the room. She is at a loss as to who could have played such an evil joke on her. At the same time, this joke seems too childish to her. The protagonist recalls everyone she has met in this house, and the face of the senior maid comes to mind, which seems strange to her. Rudbeckia is upset because she realizes that she could have another enemy in the form of a maid who has considerable authority and power here. While she was wondering who could have played such a joke on her, something terrible happened. Rudbeckia's eyes were filled with tears and horror. That same dark night, a real monster with green eyes came to Ruby's room. She could not move from fright and numbness. While Rudbeckia was sitting on the floor thinking about how to escape, a huge monster tried to break the glass on the window and get inside. When the monster did manage to get into the room, the young lady started screaming for him to stay away from her. She continued to sit and not move. Then she decided to run fast, but she couldn't move. My hands seemed to be glued to the floor, either from shock or from powerlessness. The monster was getting closer and closer to the girl, and she was in a real trap and could only scream loudly to keep it away. Finally, a maid came to answer her cry. She stood in the doorway and wanted to ask why the lady had woken up. But she didn't even have time to finish, because she saw something terrible. The maid immediately began to scream loudly when a real monster appeared before her, circling his victim Rudbeckia. A frightened Alina also ran into the room, shouting the protagonist's name in disbelief at what was happening in their castle. In all the commotion, no one immediately noticed how bright and warm the room became. The fire seemed to burn and drive away a terrible northern monster. Afraid that the monster might get even angrier and take revenge, Rudbeckia covered her face with her hands and screamed in terror. A real struggle broke out in the room, a battle between good and evil, light and darkness. Ruby couldn't even move and run out of there. She was only defending herself. She sat there and cried. She realized that she was in great danger and that no one could protect her. When everything finally calmed down, Rudbeckia was a little embarrassed by the person who appeared before her. Iska, who was present during this whole struggle, looked very calm and looked attentively at the guest in his castle of Omerta. All he managed to say was the word "why." Iska did not even greet her or introduce himself. Rudbeckia appeared before him in a less than tidy state. She apologized and said she did not understand what he wanted to ask her. Iski added that he did not understand why Rudbeckia turned off all the lights in the room, because they were sacred, and that is why the monster came to them. Rudbeckia was mentally angry with him for thinking she was so stupid and that she could have done it on her own. She managed to control herself and said in a naive voice that she must have been misunderstood and had not turned anything off. But her explanation was cut off in mid-sentence. Iski stopped her and told her that he thought she was taking on too much and wanted to be the center of attention. He further reflected on the reasons for her behavior. He also assumed that she was doing these strange things to end her marriage to him as soon as possible, and that she had a good reason for doing so. Ruby was seriously scared. Her inner voice told her that her husband would certainly not be happy about their marriage, but she definitely did not expect such a reaction. Elena, who had been present in the room the whole time, decided to take Rudbeckia's side and asked her brother not to yell at her. She added that they have not yet figured out who could have done this. She continued to persuade Iska. Elena argued that Rudbeckia might not have known about the sacred fires, because they don't do this in her homeland of Romagna. The little girl inside the protagonist appreciated this kind gesture on Elena's part and said that she was extremely nice. Now she can even give her life for Elena. Rudbeckia's true self was shocked by this statement. Finally, Ruby, who had been standing behind Elena as if hiding from Isk, managed to open her mouth and explain in a quiet, uncertain voice that she felt cold in the room. Isk nervously asked her again, because he couldn't hear anything. Rudbeckia, still standing behind the princess, clarified that when she woke up, she immediately noticed that the room was cold and dark because all the lights were out. Iski continued to put pressure on his frightened wife. He said that he felt as if she was trying to say that either he or his sister had put out the lights. Elena cannot stand such rudeness from her brother and asks him to stop again. Ruby, frightened, digs her fingers into her sister Isk's hand and apologizes, trying to explain everything again. Rudbeckia has no choice but to admit that it was probably her who turned off the lights because she was sleepy and didn't understand. The brother and sister look confused by this revelation. She cries and promises that she will not allow this to happen again and apologizes for the night's commotion in the house. Elena feels sorry for her guest and tries to caress her and calm her down, speaking to her affectionately. Iska just stands there and watches everything in silence. He looks nervous and embarrassed in front of a stranger and can't hide the fact that something is bothering him. He goes on to say that he has one question for her. Rudbeckia, who has tears streaming down her face, does not know what to say to this and puts herself and everyone else in the room in a stupor. Iski was even more confused by this situation and continued to remain silent. Then the protagonist turns around and quickly walks away from the girls. At the same time, he asks Ruby to forget everything and not pay attention. Rudbeckia was disappointed by her husband's behavior and shocked by his open and undisguised disdain for her. She stood still and watched Iski go. Her mind was in real chaos at the time, and she was angry that he didn't finish the conversation and decided to leave. Soon the horrible night was over, and a new sunny day began. The girls sat and had breakfast at the table. Iski was not with them, but Rudbeckia felt a little calmer without him. But the main character had no appetite either. She was worried that if she ate something, she might vomit on nervous grounds after such a night. All she could think about now was someone telling her that all those nighttime adventures were just a bad dream. Elena was the first to start the conversation. Despite the guest, she promised her that this would never happen again in their castle. Ruby did not understand what the princess meant and nervously asked her again. Elena clarified that she meant that she was sorry, because the guest woke up from the cold. Rudbeckia was glad that Elena did not suspect her and realized that the enemy was someone else. She thanked her with a smile for her kindness and care. Then, without looking up from her meal, Sister Isk rather discreetly informs Ruby that she must attend a royal reception in 4 days. She also adds that she can count on her help with the fees. The protagonist recalls that in the novel she read in her past life, a reception was held in honor of the anniversary of the king and queen's marriage. And the king and queen were her close relatives, namely her matchmakers. Rudbeckia quickly realized the importance of the event and asked Elena to find her a dressmaker. Sister Isk was surprised by this request and asked again. The Pope's daughter hastened to explain. She said that she felt that all the dresses she had brought would not be appropriate for the area and that she would stand out from the crowd. Elena agreed with Rudbeckia's explanation. She apologized for not thinking of it earlier and not taking care of the tailor in advance. Iski's wife blurted out her gratitude to her relative, but she realizes that no one can be trusted here because everyone is just waiting for her and Iski's marriage to end. Now she has a new challenge, which is to look decent in spite of everything and everyone to please the main people at the reception. At the same time, she notes that one important person, namely her husband Iska, disliked her very much, and this upsets her. Rudbeckia realizes that she has a difficult but very important task ahead of her because it is about the royal family. Rudbeckia, wearing a mask of an innocent angel, decided to visit a local temple, but she was scared because she didn't know what Iski's reaction would be. For her, Isk was a mysterious horse, and she really wanted to study his temper and character. That is why she went to the temple, ignoring Elena's warnings. The main character never forgot that her husband was a danger to her. It could be poisoning or even death by a knight's sword. Therefore, she will do everything necessary to protect herself. Therefore, Rudbeckia chose the strategy of being an innocent, sweet girl, even naive. In her opinion, this was the only way she could be ensured if she also failed to save Elena. The easiest way, of course, was poisoning. Iski will not be able to survive the death of her sister, with whom she is so close. This will make their relationship with Ruby even more tense, as she will bear all the suspicion for what they have done. This is what happened in the novel. Elena became engaged to a prince and was poisoned for it. This all happened in the country of Dorias, where the prince ruled. The entire Borgia family has always been involved in strange, mysterious murders, and everyone knew about it. And the relationship between the Pope and the prince was very bad, as if there was a long-standing conflict between them. It is therefore not surprising that all suspicion fell on the Pope's family, and the daughter understood and took this into account. She believes that her father made a big mistake in committing such a murder. After all, this will quickly become known to everyone. Therefore, in her present life, Rudbeckia is tormented by the fact that she knows about Elena's inevitable death, but she cannot help it, let alone tell her about it in advance. She knows her father well, so she is sure that he has placed his men around Arendelle to keep an eye on her. Therefore, it must be vigilant and careful. If she is caught, she will be sent back to her parents' home immediately. And she would definitely not be safe there if her father found out about her betrayal of the family. As Rudbeckia stood by the window and thought about what to do next, a young man came into the room, flushed. She asked him who he was looking for. The young knight looked very confused and could not even say a word or answer the question. Then he began to recover a little, because he realized that it was Miss Rudbeckia, a guest from the south, standing in front of him. He said that he was the one who met her yesterday when she arrived at the port on the ship. The young man added that he was in a group of defenders. Rudbeckia apologized for not realizing it right away. The knight accepted the apology and said that it was not surprising that she did not recognize him. It turned out that Rudbeckia had come to the church, so he asked what brought her here. Ruby stood looking at the boy excitedly. She was so confused that she could not formulate her answer. Tension arose between the young people in the conversation. Miss Rudbeckia finally answered that she had come here to see her husband. The blonde knight was mentally angry when he realized that she'd come here for Iski. I thought he was a complete fool. He politely asked Rudbeckia if it was to see Iska that she had come here. She nodded affirmatively. He realized what was about to happen and asked the lady to wait a moment while he went to call her husband. Rudbeckia stayed waiting, and the young knight called out to Isk. He told him that his wife had arrived and that he should hurry. The tone of the conversation was not very friendly. Iski was surprised to see such a guest and asked if it was his wife and Mrs. Rudbeckia who had come here. Rudbeckia heard their conversation and noted that this young man had a rather nice appearance but a very sharp tongue. He was rude to her husband and other knights. Iski went into the room where the young lady was waiting for him and asked her why she was there. Rudbeckia turned to him and remained silent. It took her a long time to find the right words because she was afraid of him. Iski folded his arms and looked like a master at the same time. He continued to stand motionless and waited for an answer. Rudbeckia shyly tilted her head in front of him and tried to say something, but only mumbled. She was confused by the fact that that second knight and Iski entered the room quietly when she was not expecting and was not prepared. The girl turned to Isk, who continued to be completely indifferent. She said she was worried that she could have caused his bad mood. The man waved his hand and said that he was fine and that she could see for herself. Then he turned his back and said that she could be free now. Rudbeckia dared to pull his sleeve and ask him to wait and not go anywhere. She was so clumsy that she didn't notice how her basket fell and all the fruit scattered on the floor. A desperate cry escaped her lips. Rudbeckia was afraid that she had made a ridiculous mistake. After all, Alina had told her that the fruit was too expensive. Instantly, she decided to sit down and start putting everything back into the basket before the prince could come to his senses and realize what had happened. Watching the lady put the fruit that was lying on the dirty floor into the basket, Iski emotionally asked her why she was doing this. Ruby was very offended and resented him for his rudeness. She was angry that he had no sympathy for her. She was able to apologize through her strength and said that she had brought the fruit especially for him. Iski replied that he was not interested at all. He repeated the question of why she was picking up food from the floor. Rudbeckia started to get up from her knees and wanted to end this pointless conversation. But in her mind, she wanted him to crawl on the floor and pick fruit on his own. The lady realized it was time to turn on the actress and started crying. She began to apologize for the misunderstanding between them while playing the victim. They continued their dialogue. Isk asked what she meant about the misunderstanding. Ruby reminded him that he thought she was looking for reasons to have their marriage declared null and void. Sitting on the floor, Rudbeckia continued to sob. She said she understood how much her husband hated her, but she only wants the best for him. Iski must have smiled for the first time and asked her who told her that he didn't like her and where she got that from. The girl finally looked up at him, her eyes still watering, and tried to clarify what she meant. She said she thought he didn't like her. Isk immediately denied this. She happily asked him if he was telling the truth. The heroine realized that now everything might not go according to plan if he falls in love with her, so she decided to think about a different strategy. With innocent eyes, she asked again if she had heard him say that he did not hate her, and he confirmed it again without explaining anything else. Rudbeckia continued to sit on the floor and did not hide her joy and relief at what she had heard. Iski stood silently watching her behavior. Finally, she realized that she looked strange now and overplayed her emotions of happiness a bit. Suddenly, Iski's face changed, and he became angry and indifferent again. He shouted out that he did not understand what he was doing here now, as if taking back his last words. The warming that had lasted just a minute between them disappeared in an instant. Rudbeckia decided to accept his challenge, and it even encouraged her. But she plunged back into the role of a victim in front of him and began to ask him what he meant. The heroine did not expect such a reaction from him so quickly, so she decided that she was just lucky. This encouraged her to play on and go all in. Isk helped the girl pick the fruit, and then he tried to insult her again when he openly stated that he did not need her attention and care. Rudbeckia burst into tears again. She wanted to object to him, but he interrupted her and did not let her finish. Iski stood there and said in a completely indifferent voice that he wouldn't give a damn even if the whole circus ended today. He asked her not to have any illusions about their marriage. Then the strongest knight in the north added that he did not like to communicate with people without brains, openly hinting that he considered Rudbeckia stupid. When he suggested that Ruby write a letter to her family asking them to take her home, it finally knocked the ground out from under her. She again pretended to be an innocent victim. Iski turned around and headed for the exit. At that moment, Rudbeckia thought she was a bit of an executioner. I thought he would feel sorry for her if she pretended to be a poor kitten. Finally, she realized that he was a serious and intelligent man who would definitely not buy into women's tears and would not feel sorry for them. But at the same time, Ruby realized that he had also miscalculated. Apparently, he thought that if he created a verbal conflict with her, he would appear too infantile. In his opinion, this should have played into his hands. Rudbeckia was excited because she had come up with a new tactic for dealing with him. Now she intends to do the obvious in front of him, and this will enable him to quickly bring it to the clean water. At the same time, she thought, it would clear her of all suspicion. The girl hurried to shout after Iski that she did not want to write a letter to her family and leave Omerta Castle. She decided to pull out one more trick up her sleeve, which she believed would definitely bring Iski to his knees. Rudbeckia would win the main prize for Best Actress. She clenched her fists and emotionally said that she had fallen in love with Iski. Iski did not turn around, so she shouted again that she loved him. She forgot for a moment that they were not alone, but the other knights hear her frank confession. But she cared little about that. Rudbeckia was delighted with herself for such a dramatic performance and admitted that no one could be indifferent. Iski finally turned around. He was confused and could only say one word. The young man tried to understand whether he had heard everything correctly. Rudbeckia mentally laughed at his expression. She told him that she understood that he had heard declarations of love more than once and that he might not like her. But with a tragic look, she added that he was the first one to save her so heroically yesterday when she was attacked by a monster. Rudbeckia also admitted that she did not need anything from him, but now she wants to thank him and help him. Ruby followed the plan. She realized that she might have a chance to get closer to him only if her actions were obvious and did not attract attention. She reminded herself of this once again. It all resembled a theater in which the witnesses of the events, the people who were there in the church, were like spectators. They supported Rudbeckia and shouted that she was such a brave girl. Meanwhile, Ruby notices that Isk is once again heading for the exit and is almost at the door. This irritated her. Realizing that she has the last chance to reach him now, she shouts out promises that she will respect his boundaries and not interfere where she is not asked. This is all happening in front of dozens of people, but she hears Iska slam the door and leave. Today, she failed to attract his attention to her and decided that she would continue playing with him next time. The next day, the main character takes care of her hair. The assistant tells her that everything is finally ready. Rudbeckia, looking gorgeous, looks at herself in the mirror and rejoices that this day has finally come. At the same time, she thinks that her stubborn and indifferent husband, Iska, has never sought to meet her after the temple, but he immediately finds an explanation for this. She remembered Alina saying that paladins are very busy in the summer. Alina stands downstairs and watches the charming Rudbeckia come downstairs from her chambers. She notices that she is already prepared for the appointment. At the same time, she refers to Rudbeckia, as she promised, simply by her first name. Ruby was also delighted with Alina's beauty. She was also captivated by the girl's sweetness. And she is glad that Alina managed to avoid marriage with her stupid brother Angel. But she realizes that this cannot be allowed to happen in the future. Rudbeckia confirms that she is ready and asks who the girl next to Alina is. Iska's sister replies that a family friend is with her and introduces her to Freya Van Furien. The girl with the angelic face greets Rudbeckia and calls her Mrs. Freya looks open and friendly and says that she is glad to finally meet a guest from the south. Rudbeckia realizes that she is now facing her childhood friend, whom she has heard about many times before. She is worried that the maids are so helpful to her and happy to see her in the castle, but she is the wife of their master and no one else. Rudbeckia quickly switches to acting and says that she is also very happy to meet Lady Furiana. Freya is stunned by how sweet and charming Rudbeckia is. She clearly did not expect this. All three ladies continue to stand downstairs. Freya whispers to Alina and claims that she hasn't told her that Iska's wife is such a wonderful girl. Alina responds by saying that she hasn't said anything about her at all. Freya's appraising gaze frightened Rudbeckia because she did not yet understand her true intentions toward her. She even thought they were looking at her dress and whispering to each other. She felt insecure about it. Alina decided to change the subject and told Rudbeckia that her brother might be late and asked her to be understanding. She also added that he is often busy, and this is normal for him. Rudbeckia tactfully says that there is nothing wrong with this and that Alina has nothing to apologize for. But at the same time, she mocks Iska because he is not someone who should be treated with understanding. The main character actually wants to meet Isk. She makes a wish for him to come even if it is already night. The girls went to a reception at the Angwan royal court. The coachman quickly rushes them in a carriage. Rudbeckia, along with Alina and Freya, entered the room where the social event was taking place. The girl is looking around. She notes that this technique reminds her a lot of similar techniques in Romany. She recalls the people from those lands who were so kind to her and her hostess Julia. This, in their opinion, was to help them get to know the Pope and his sons. The protagonist admits to herself that she is afraid of someone finding out who she really is. From the outside, she seems so successful that she attracted many envious and idolized people. She worries about what will happen if everyone finds out how miserable her life really is, and that she is not an ideal. Rudbeckia is returning to reality. Now she is worried that she is too short and is embarrassed in the presence of two tall, slender girls, Alina and Freya. By the way, in all her lives she was short. People at the reception begin to greet Miss Rudbeckia and ask her how her father is doing. There is a commotion in the crowd from all sides. As Ruby moves on, everyone pays attention to her and whispers to each other, saying that she is the wife of the mightiest knight of Omerta. She is literally bombarded with questions about her famous father. Is he feeling well? And when is he planning to visit Arundel? Rudbeckia gets a laugh out of such questions. Elena, who had been by his side all along, pretended to be surprised by this stony, heartless man. Rudbeckia doesn't understand who we're talking about, but she is very pleased and amused by this, because she did not expect Lady Elena to be able to express herself so emotionally about someone. Then something happened that Rudbeckia did not expect. Iski appeared in the crowd, and Freya shouted to him affectionately, not hiding her joy. Iski was in the presence of other knights. They were the ones who were in the church at the time and heard his unpleasant conversation with his wife. Rudbeckia looks confused, but tries to wave to him in greeting. She doesn't understand why he came so early, as he was supposed to be late. Isk defiantly turns away from Ruby when she gives him signs of attention, but this does not surprise her much. Freya noticed his dismissive attitude toward his wife and suggested that Alina go over and reprimand him. Alina replied that he would not listen to anyone, let alone them. Rudbeckia was furious. She clenches her fists and quickly heads toward Iska. Her companions try to shout at the furious girl. Rudbeckia realizes that things can't get any worse. He showed his contempt for her on the first day, and everyone could see it. That's why I didn't stop. The girl thinks that she has already experienced all the worst shame with him, but he can humiliate her again and again. People in the crowd stood and watched the performance, and each reacted in their own way. Isk finally decided to turn around and face his wife. Rudbeckia decided that she had nothing to fear anymore and approached her husband. We need to play all our cards, she thought. The women's support group stood there and did not move. They were worried and wondered what Rudbeckia would do in such a situation. The knights who arrived from Iski also opened their mouths out of curiosity about what was about to happen. Rudbeckia was able to pull herself together and start an excellent acting performance with a touch of drama. With an angelic and friendly face, she turned to Isk and told him that she was very happy to see him here and complimented him on his impeccable appearance. The audience was surprised. Rudbeckia herself realized that everyone expected her to slap him. She again reminded herself that she had chosen the tactics of an innocent kitten, so she meekly folded her arms in front of the man. But she really wanted to charge him up to the hilt. Iski was taken by surprise by his wife's behavior and did not know how to react. When he finally regained control of himself, he blurted out that he thought his wife was not very bright and had lost her sense of propriety. Rudbeckia apologizes for her behavior and tries to explain what she said, but he interrupts her and does not give her the opportunity to explain. He reminds her that she promised to stay out of his way. Rudbeckia giggles and is glad he remembered it. This shows that he was listening to her carefully at the time. Iski does not understand his wife's joy and asks her what happened. Rudbeckia thanks him and promises that she will not be so intrusive to him anymore. All those present are watching attentively. She added that she would now watch her husband from a distance and not approach him. Iski ponders her words. Rudbeckia decided that she had done and said enough to make Iski look bad, so she thought it was time to end the circus and leave. The furious Iska caught up with his poor wife and grabbed her. He demanded that she repeat everything she had said so far and explain it. The situation between them became very heated. Rudbeckia clarified that she would look at him so that he would not notice her presence. Iska tried to threaten her. The emotions between the husband and wife did not subside. The girl was screaming and did not understand why their simple dialogue could lead to such horror. Iski asked again why she intended to secretly spy on him. He did not take his hands off her shoulders, holding her by force. Rudbeckia was really hurt, but she was able to tell him that she needed to see him, but she didn't want to be intrusive. She stuttered her words. She started to cry. Finally, she realized why he had such a reaction to her words. He probably thought she was planning to kill him secretly. Iski's face didn't change much. Neither her tears nor her frank confessions could move him. Comrade Iska, that other knight, was standing behind him the whole time and saw this scene. He coughed at this interesting situation and turned to Rudbeckia. He told her that she was acting very dangerously. Rudbeckia asked him what he meant, but she also realized that the emotional Iski was capable of anything, even murder. The main character listened attentively to the blonde young man. He clarified that he meant that her husband could have thought that she was intending to kill him. He added that there is something else. To some extent, it was because the north is a completely different terrain. There are many more dangers here. And so, he said, all of their knights have special physical characteristics, unlike others. The young man reminded Rudbeckia of the night when Iska saved her from the monster. He clarified that at such moments, knights release all their sacred energy and the powerful energy of the sword. This sacred energy helps to find the demonic energy of the monster and end it. He continued to frighten Rudbeckia. After all, if she had been next to Iska at that moment, he could have easily killed her with his sword. After all, I would not have been able to react quickly to who was who. This confession really shocked Rudbeckia. The knight said that she could have been mistaken for a monster and attacked her with a sword. And then Ruby remembered that she had already heard about what is called a state of excessive excitement, and it comes after the knight releases all his sacred energy outward. She also thought that she should have said that she would obediently follow her husband everywhere, but only where it would be dangerous for her. She began to apologize for her behavior and words. The argument for her apology was that she reminded me that she came from the south. The blonde knight said she had nothing to apologize for because she really couldn't have known their traditions and local nuances. He mentally asked Isk to say something to diffuse the tense situation. Rudbeckia dreamed that her husband would take his hand off her shoulder as soon as possible. Now she was reassuring the knights and saying that she didn't want anyone to be embarrassed by this. Elena looked calm the whole time and did not lose her composure. She added that her brother should have been warned that he would be released earlier. Freya also playfully reproached Iskra for stopping by the castle, as 3 lovely ladies were waiting for him there. Each of them changed the subject to their own, but the dialogue between Iski and Rudbeckia was unfinished. The protagonist continued to stand there with an unchanged expression, and the young lady wondered how he could get away with it. She was sure that, like the last time, in the temple, he would simply turn around and leave, ignoring her, leaving her humiliated in front of the other knights. Rudbeckia could not have predicted or calculated that he would stay put this time. Iska finally opened his mouth to address his wife, but was cut off at the most interesting and intriguing point. All those present at the reception were informed that His Majesty was leaving. The king of the country, Britannia Pinol, and the queen appeared in the hall, and all the guests parted ways. While everyone was bowing, the king and queen headed to Rudbeckia, who was delighted with what she saw. Iska also froze beside him. They approached Ruby and greeted her kindly. His Majesty thanked her for finding the opportunity to attend the reception and said that it was a great honor. Rudbeckia bowed and thanked him for the invitation, and such a warm welcome. The king smiled slyly and said that usually his nephew was late and might even miss the event altogether. Therefore, he is inclined to believe that marriage always benefits all guys, and this case is no exception. He winked at Isk and asked him what he would say about it. Then Rudbeckia witnessed an unpleasant dialogue between her uncle and nephew. Iski said he was a copy of his father. The king reminded him that he himself had asked him never to say such things. The protagonist said that he had no complaints against anyone. He is guilty, so he will carry this cross for life. Rudbeckia noticed that Iski must be so rude and impolite with everyone. She also noted that he resembled her brother Cheshire in his audacity. The heroine concluded that such behavior does not honor Iski. He shows himself to be a complete fool. Therefore, they will not mock her, but him. The king was very angry with his nephew. He was waving his hand and wanted to say that if he wasn't the son of a woman, he would have been, but his shout was interrupted. The queen asked the man to be calm and stop shouting, because they had a little milady with them who already looked scared. Ruby was approached by a cute little girl, the daughter of the king and queen. Her mother gently told her to say hello to people first. The little princess looked at the guest with frightened eyes. She said she was happy to see Rudbeckia in the royal court of Angwan. Her voice stammered a little with excitement.